BBC News at 6 o'clock. This is Neil Sleet. Good evening. A lorry driver has been charged with the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a refrigerated vehicle in Essex. England have reached the final of the Rugby World Cup with a stunning victory over New Zealand. The DUP leader Arlene Foster has said Boris Johnson needs to renegotiate his Brexit deal if he wants her party to support it. In the past hour, a lorry driver has been charged with manslaughter and people trafficking in connection with the discovery of 39 bodies in a refrigerated container in Essex in the early hours of Wednesday. Maurice Robinson, who's 25, was the first suspect to be arrested as part of the investigation. A total of 5 people are now in custody. Essex police have met the Vietnamese ambassador to the UK after a number of families from Vietnam said they feared their relatives were among the dead. Our correspondent John Donaldson reports from Tilbury.
Essex police say all 39 bodies have now been removed from the lorry. They've been taken from Tilbury Docks to Broomfield Hospital in Chelmsford for post-mortem examinations. Detective Chief Inspector Martin Passmore said they were looking into whether there was a wider conspiracy.
It must be clear that criminals, and that's what we're dealing with, is criminals, murderers, are taking more and more chances with these vulnerable people. You know, the risk is massive. So, am I concerned? Yes, I'm concerned. Will it happen again? I really hope not, but it could well do.
Police say it will take time to identify the victims, but the focus is now on the Vietnamese community after several families came forward to say their relatives were missing. In Vietnam, the family of Nguyen Dinh Tu is already grieving. The young man left behind his wife and young son to head to the UK. His father, Nguyen Dinh Sat, says he feels certain his son was inside the lorry.
We are hungry and poor. My son went to the military. Then, when he was discharged, he borrowed a few $100 million dong to start making a living, get married, and to build a house. He was in debt, so he went abroad to seek work. Around here, in the countryside, there is nothing we can do to earn money.
Another potential victim is a 21-year-old woman, Tran Thi To. In Glasgow, we spoke to a friend who was hoping to see her once she arrived in the UK. He didn't want to be identified, but said he was from the same part of Vietnam and had spoken to some of the families who had told him they were waiting for a miracle. Tonight, police have charged 25-year-old Maurice Robinson with 39 counts of manslaughter, conspiracy to traffic people and money laundering. He was detained shortly after the bodies were found in the early hours of Wednesday morning. A 5th person wanted in connection with the deaths has been arrested. Irish police say the man in his early 20s from Northern Ireland was stopped at the port in Dublin. 3 other people are still being questioned.
England have upset the odds to reach the final of the Rugby World Cup in Japan after a dominant display against the defending champions New Zealand. England's win by 19 points to 7 was the first time they'd beaten the All Blacks in the history of the tournament. They'd lost 15 of their previous 16 encounters. England will now play either Wales or South Africa in next week's final. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss watched England produce a superb performance in Yokohama.
He's called the knock-on and he's called the full-time whistle. And England men and women all around the Yokohama International Stadium rise to celebrate one of the most authoritative, dominant and famous victories in English rugby history.
Surely never in their wildest dreams could England fans have expected this. New Zealand are the superpowers of rugby. They hadn't lost a World Cup match for 12 years, and yet on a memorable night they were utterly outclassed. England stamped their authority from the kickoff and were ahead within barely 90 seconds.
So here's Courtney Laws. He's a matter of inches short. England pick and go again, and they score round the fringe. And it's Manu Tuolangi as England make quite simply the dream start to this semi-final.
And from there they took control. The All Blacks had no answer to their pace, poise and power. England led 10-0 at the break, and while Ardie Savea's try briefly gave New Zealand hope, 3 penalties from George Ford took England out of sight and into their first World Cup final since 2007. But despite such a superb display, their head coach Eddie Jones said they're not getting carried away.
It was just another week in the comp, mate. You know, that's all we got. You come here 8 weeks ago and you want to go right to the death, and we're in the death now. And so we've got another week to enjoy ourselves, work as a team, have a great experience. At the end of the day, you know, our players made a commitment to each other that they'd enjoy the World Cup, and I think we're seeing that.
England will now face the winner of tomorrow's semi-final between Wales and South Africa. But on this hugely impressive form, they'll take some beating.
Eddie Jones made an immediate impact when he was appointed in 2015, but he's faced questions about his selections and tactics after England's unconvincing performances in the last two Six Nations tournaments. With his assessment of the team's achievements, here's our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
Not since 2003, when the World Cup was won, has English rugby enjoyed a moment as significant as this. Their immense display in Yokohama over the dominant force in the game, ending New Zealand's long reign in the tournament. 4 years ago, England were humiliated as they crashed out in the group stage of their own World Cup. The governing body, the RFU, invested heavily, hiring Australian Eddie Jones and making him the highest paid coach in the sport. His tenure's not always been plain sailing. England finished 5th in last year's Six Nations. But his focus was always on this World Cup, tasked with reaching the semi-finals here in Japan. He's now gone one better, restoring pride in the team after a first ever win over the All Blacks in this tournament. Selections have been vindicated, the team appears more unified than ever, and young stars such as flankers Tom Curry and Sam Underhill have been introduced. The RFU will now want Jones to stay on for another 4 years. Tomorrow he'll discover whether his team faces Wales or South Africa in the final. But such was their intensity, power and physicality, they will start as firm favourites whoever they play after one of the great England performances in any sport.
The Democratic Unionist leader Arlene Foster has told her party conference that Boris Johnson's Brexit deal would weaken the foundations of the United Kingdom. Unlike the previous 2 years, there were no senior Conservative politicians at the event today. The DUP's 10 MPs have helped to inflict defeats on the Prime Minister in recent votes in Parliament. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page reports from the conference in Belfast.
Arlene Foster began her speech with a biting reminder to last year's guest speaker about the DUP's pivotal position in the House of Commons.
Rather than have Boris with us today, we have had to send him to the naughty step in Parliament twice in this last week. Twice!
If the party's 10 MPs had sided with the government rather than gone against it, the Prime Minister would have won significant Brexit votes in recent days. Mrs Foster underlined the DUP's opposition to the EU withdrawal agreement because of the prospect of customs checks